Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, the Swansea City podcast. I am Guto and with me as always we have Steve Carroll and Matt Barocco. Evening, boys.
Evening.
You are in for a treat tonight. Before we get on to that, though, a little quick apology that we've been away for so long. We've got 3 matches to catch up on, which we will be doing over the coming minutes. But we'll also be looking ahead to the very exciting first leg of the playoffs against Barnsley. I've got a good feeling about this podcast. I think there's a good vibe about the place. We've got a lot to discuss, so let's get straight into it by looking back at the match which actually sealed our place in the playoffs. Steve, we only needed a draw against Reading, and that's exactly what we got. How did you see this match?
I didn't think it was brilliant, particularly in the first half. Obviously, we conceded what was quite a soft goal. I thought it was nicely worked by Reading, but Bidwell switched off and allowed the striker in to score what was a good header. But didn't think we offered a lot, really. But then, to be fair, as soon as AU come on, there was that nice little flick, wasn't there, that set Lowe away and he scored. And then I thought the second goal that we scored was excellent, really. So it was an improvement, definitely, after the break. I think it was frustrating then that late on, obviously, we conceded again. It's not a great habit that we've been in, is it, over the last 10 games or so. With, there's quite a few times we've conceded a goal right at the end of the game. So that's something we need to be aware of. But I mean, if we're being honest, we'd have all taken the draw because the draw was what mathematically was enough to guarantee us a playoff place. So in that sense, really, it was job done, wasn't it?
And, I've said before, sometimes Andre Ayew, as brilliant as he is, can be frustrating. But I think against Reading, we really did show how valuable he is, because I didn't think the Swans were that bad against Reading, but we definitely didn't have any kind of cutting edge until he came on. And then suddenly the tempo upped. There was a bit more creativity, a bit more of a threat from us, wasn't there? And it showed again that, even though he can be frustrating at times, he is going to be absolutely key when it comes to the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't really afford to be without him, can we? I think that's the best way of looking at it. Like you say, he can be frustrating on times, but I mean, would you want a Swansea team without him? I mean, if you can help it, no, I would say. And obviously, we hopefully won't find that out next season either. But yeah, we definitely need him in the side, don't we? And hopefully he's had a little break now, because he's sat out 1 or 2 games. Obviously, he did have a bit of a knock, but he's played so much football, hasn't he? That hopefully that little rest may have done him so good, and he'll be a little bit fresher now for what is to come.
You did say that you were, concerned about late goals. By my count, it's 6 games in the last in our last 10 in which the opposition has scored after the 80th minute. Some of those, of course, coming in the 90th minute. It's not really been a trait for most of the season. Why do you think it's crept into our game in the last 10 games or so?
It's hard to really put your finger on it. I mean, it could just be coincidences in some ways. I mean, look at the Birmingham one where there was the penalty. I think Dander's a bit unlucky. He slipped, doesn't he? And, what can you do then? You're giving away a penalty. You're always going to be up against it in terms of keeping it out. Where else was there? The Preston game we conceded late, didn't we? I think there was a bit of a deflection on that. Maybe we were a bit unlucky, but I think I did say on previous pods really that maybe our luck was just running out a little bit in that sense. And then, the Reading one, I think from what I remember, the ball went through a fairly big crowd of players. That maybe could have been stopped, I think. I think the Bournemouth score against us very late on, I think, but obviously we were already 2 down, so
yeah,
that didn't do a lot of damage, really, did it? But it's a concern. We can't say anything else about it. I think it just needs to reiterate that the game is 90 minutes, and got to make sure you keep your concentration, really, because you can concede at the end otherwise, as we have done recently. So I think maybe it's just a bit of a kick up the backside, really, although, there weren't really similar types of goals in there. As I've said, they were, maybe a little bit unlucky.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, let's move on then, Matt. Swans secured their place in the playoffs, and that meant that we could take it a bit easier when it came to Derby. I mean, we made a few changes, didn't pick a full strength side. Before we get on to discuss the match, did you agree with that decision? Because obviously Derby were in the midst of a relegation battle, and let's face it, the whole of the Championship wanted to see them go down. They wanted to see Wayne Rooney relegated. So, I mean, we weren't really, doing the neutrals a favour by picking a softer side, were we?
No, but at the same time, there were still players in there which I would have liked to seen given a break if possible. It wasn't as maybe weak as I would have chosen it. I would have properly stretched the EFL rules to the limit and used as few first teamers as possible, because I think where we all agree our season perhaps has just hit the buffers a little bit is that we're absolutely exhausted. And having secured playoff place, there was only one thing really to compete from at that point, and that was to get the second leg at home, which is something we've since secured. So there was something that we could get in the pot still for us, but I was more looking at, it doesn't matter when the games are playing or what advantage you can gain from playing here first and there second, etc. If we don't turn up, which obviously the last few weeks we've struggled to do so because of the tired legs, then we got no chance against anyone. So I would have gone with an even weaker squad, to be honest with you. But that said, we had enough. We did rest a few players, and we had enough to get over the line. So I wanted Derby to go down. So the fact we were able to rest a few and still put them in jeopardy for the final day was doubly pleasing.
I think even some Derby fans wanted them to go down. They've been so bad and so miserable this season, honestly. And it did look, actually, like they were going to stay up at one point. They took the lead from across, but the Swans, to the credit, did come back and scored 2 quick-fire goals. Can we read much into that they had the kind of character to come back, or do we have to put the massive asterisk next to it because it was against Derby, who, as we have seen for the last God knows how long, are absolutely abysmal?
They are really poor, and even I watched the final day game again against their game against Sheffield Wednesday, but they were so poor in that game as well, and against us. But I want to say that it's exactly the sort of game that we would normally drop points in. You look at it and you go, oh, they've lost the last 6 on a bounce, and we've won 3 on a bounce. Well, Swansea City will find a way and contrive to lose it. So that we came back in the manner that we did was really pleasing, because it was an early goal in the second half, which is a bit of a sucker punch. Really disappointing goal to concede, and to come back, you were just thinking, maybe we haven't got we're lacking a bit of fizz, a little bit of movement and options to try and grab that equaliser. And whilst Whittaker's replacement was being readied on the sideline, he's popped up with equaliser with goal line technology helping us out, even though it was fine margins, but they all count. So he'll be delighted, especially against his former employers. So we went from that to the sublime then with the goal by Connor Roberts, which was superbly laid on by Matt Grimes with like a 40-yard crossfield pass assist, and the first time volley. It was just an absolutely delightful goal. So a double sucker punch for Derby there, and in truth, they never really recovered from that.
Steve, one brilliant thing about the Swans' comeback was that the goal scorer for the first goal was Morgan Whittaker, and he didn't hold back in his celebrations, even though it was against his former side. I think I speak for every single football fan when I say more of this, please.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the whole thing of players not celebrating goals is against former teams. Like, it is a little bit too far. Like, there's obviously an exception. Like, I remember Lampard once scored against Chelsea for Man City, and you're thinking, okay, that's sort of fair enough because he's a club legend. But like, I remember things like John Joe Shelby once not celebrating it against Liverpool, and I'm thinking to myself, they didn't give you a chance. So why are you like almost putting your hands up to apologise over a goal? It's. It's fair enough if you don't go like absolutely berserk, but at the same time, you shouldn't be toning it down. I mean, just scored a goal, haven't you? It's seems like everyone's so scared of offending anybody anymore. And I thought it was fair enough from Whittaker. And I think when we signed him, remember, their fans weren't exactly complimentary about him, so maybe that was partly behind his thinking as well. He just thought, oh well, have that then. And
I'm all for more of the Emmanuel Adebayor celebrations, Guto. Run full length all across the pitch.
It's a bit more difficult when there's no fans in the stadium. But in fairness, if without fans in the stadium, Morgan Whittaker's was about as close to an Adebayor as you can get, really. That's apart from it was Kevin Ellison who scored for for Newport.
He went up to the manager, didn't he?
Yeah, and kind of shouted in his face. That's
fair there, because they're both in the playoffs and they're not playing each other in the first leg, so it could be the final.
Can you imagine? I don't see Newport County making the final personally, but wow, that would be tense. That you could see a lot being written about that in the build-up. But yeah, Matt, we did get the win against Derby, and I think it's fair to say it's pretty good that we got that win, because our form otherwise over the past few weeks has been really ropey, and it's just given us that boost of a W in the run up to the playoffs, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. And it did, like I say, it did leave us with something to play for. It left the door open for results elsewhere pending, for an opportunity to snatch fourth. And I think, if that is on the table, then you've got to look at it and think, well, there's statistical advantage to doing that. You want to have, albeit with reduced numbers, in normal times, to play in front of a full house when that is the final day of the playoff semis, where you can push it to extra time, you get the extra minutes that you wouldn't get in the first leg, etc., and all that, and all the psychological advantage to come with it. There's still going to be some psychological advantage to having the home leg second, and so it gave us that opportunity. And as we'll discuss, it's something that we managed to get over the line in the end. But it's good for confidence. There's a few fringe players that got game time over the last couple of games, which will help them, and maybe have a question mark over their use over the playoffs now for Cooper. And that will in turn allow some of those mainstays then to not be run into the ground again, and perhaps give themselves an opportunity that if we do have an opportunity to sub one or two of them off with an hour gone and prepare for what's to come, then brill. But no, absolutely, I'm just happy that we're not going in there completely dead and devoid of hope.
Yeah, because I don't know how much of a part that played last season, but I think when you look back to last season's playoffs, we had a number of injuries plus a suspension to Kyle Norton. So even though we had that adrenaline from beating Reading 4-1, it was a depleted squad that took on Brentford, and we didn't really give ourselves the best chance of getting to Wembley last season. I think it's fair to say. So definitely the focus over the last few games has been on kind of not picking up injuries, and the final game of the season, a total dead rubber really. Swans knew pretty much where we would be in the table. We were playing against a Watford team that had already secured promotion. Steve, I know you didn't watch the match, but are you in any way concerned by the fact that we lost 2-0 to a team that fielded basically their second string against us?
It's a nothing game really, so I can't say I'm overly concerned. If I'd watched it, I might have a different story. It could be a case of ignorance is bliss. I always remember the year that we went to Man United and won on the opening day. I missed the Villarreal game that was meant to have been terrible, and then everyone said that we had no chance going to Old Trafford, and I was actually quietly confident we could get something, and obviously we ended up winning. So that may have just been ignorance on that occasion, but yeah, I'm not overly concerned. I mean, I think once you're in the playoffs, the results and performances may change slightly. You just don't know, do you, especially when you make changes and stuff. So, I think we'll see what happens on Monday night. Really, I can't say I've lost any sleep over it.
We are owing, just to add to that, what you were just saying, Guto, we are owing Bournemouth's surprise defeat at home to Stoke on the final day. Because had they won that game and got the 3 points, they'd have leapfrogged us into fourth, which would have, of course, then meant that we'd have had them away second leg as well, by the looks of things.
Like Stoke are just doing us favours around the clock these days.
They're just the people's club of Swansea.
Stoke are just such a fine football club. They really are. Just
Take
good
that back.
people. Just good people. I will not hear any bad words said against Stoke City, a fine establishment.
And they're releasing Sam Clucas on a free transfer, so go and get him.
No, we don't even joke.
Oh, have I gone too far?
We do not even joke about that. No, we don't. We do not need to repeat that mistake. Even if we don't splash 20 million on him this time like we did last time, still getting nightmares about that. I mean, Matt, you saw bits of the game. I think you're a bit like me, really, half watching the Swans game, half watching the much more significant Derby versus Wednesday match. I mean, what were your takeaways from that match?
From which one? From the Swans game?
The Swans game, yeah, if any.
I mean, like I saw about 20-25 minutes, constant of it. So I'm not going to profess to have the inside scoop on it, but I have seen like all the chances created and extended highlights and whatnot. It looked like we created enough, and we had some bright movements and some bright chances. Liam Cullen again impressed from what I saw. He came very close with at least one opportunity, and maybe should have done a bit better with it. But he looks like a natural striker. He looks like someone who plays up there, and he's only interested in scoring goals. So that's something we need to obviously rectify next season, in our personnel to actually have a recognised striker on the books. And let's hope that whatever division we're in, he gets game time, because he looks a prospect, and others as well. Others made good chances, and Ayew had one. I think it was late in or mid through the first half. Grimes fired one, which keepers turned behind. So I don't think we were run into the ground by Watford, and whether you have question marks over the goals that Watford scored or not, it did turn out, courtesy of Bournemouth's result, that it turned out not to matter anyway. So it's, from what I've read, it sounded a lot like we put in a decent performance and a promising performance, and something that people are happy to take into the playoffs. So that's good news.
Yeah, I'd go along with that, if I'm being honest. I thought the Swans looked refreshed. I thought they looked fitter than they have done. I think it seems to have made a difference that we haven't had that kind of congested fixture list, which we've had all season. And hopefully that's going to make a difference going into the playoffs too, because, just having that little week to prepare, both tactically and in terms of rest and fitness, etc., could make a significant difference in this type of match. But it wasn't perfect by any means against Watford. We weren't that clinical in the final third, and we were a little bit open at the back. But we also played some decent football, passed the ball around quite sharply. The accuracy of the passing definitely seemed much better than it has been for most of the season. We created some chances. And I thought we were decent on the whole, and Watford won with two goals of high quality. The first one, a brilliant cross into the box, which Andre Gray couldn't really miss, and then a fantastic strike from Isaac Success to seal it. Obviously, ideally, we wouldn't have lost that match, but I do think it was kind of preparation for the playoffs, really, and a chance to just get the fitness ready, just get into the right mood basically ahead of the playoffs. And I think as preparation for that match goes, it wasn't too bad really. So I'm not too concerned that we lost it. And actually, there were some positive signs there. Just before we go on to talk about the playoffs, let's look back at kind of the championship season as a whole, because it's been such a strange season, not just for the Swans, obviously, but for everyone. No fans in the stadiums. The season's been a month shorter than usual, and that's meant that we've been bombarded with football, really. I mean, how do you think that's affected the quality of the league, Steve, and kind of the product then of the championship this season?
I don't think it's been great, if I'm honest, but that's not a huge surprise, really, given what you've said, is it? I mean, it's been a month less this season. When it's 46 games, I mean, the amount of midweeks we've had is absolutely staggering. I mean, you're talking probably closer to 20 than 10. It's unbelievable, really, isn't it? And even when, we've had international breaks, we've had players that have been called up tonight. I mean, the likes of Connor Roberts in the space of 9 months have played over 50 games. It's an incredible amount. And you think that the other big thing with obviously the pandemic would be, the hassle of the travelling. I mean, it's always difficult for us anyway, but you wonder if there may have been somewhere, I don't know, we played Stoke on a midweek, for example. Sometimes we may have considered staying overnight. But I mean, the country was in lockdown. Could we even stay overnight and that type of thing? It must just have been very difficult for everybody. And I think the whole, because of the finances involved with a lot of clubs, and I think last year's relegated teams didn't lose maybe the players they would have done normally. The promoted teams that have come into this division, they would not have had much of a budget to try and close that gap. I mean, I don't think it's a massive surprise then when you look and see that the top two have been clubs that were relegated last year, and the other one is in the playoffs. And two of the clubs that have gone down from this division were promoted last season, and I think the other one were finished just outside the bottom three. So it's been a tough season, I think, for everybody. And I think it probably hasn't really been a vintage year, which isn't a great shock. But at the same time, I think football has probably kept a lot of people going during what has been, a pretty miserable time for most people. So it's been good in that sense. But I think everybody will be praying that come August we're all back in the stadium, because I think we all miss it, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, funnily enough, before recording this pod, I was listening to the Not the Top 20 podcast, which is a really good football league podcast, and they were one of the presenters there was kind of saying that how they're saying the league table doesn't lie after 46 games, and basically saying that that's a stupid thing to say. Of course, the league table can lie, and luck and injuries and just weird runs of form, etc., and refereeing decisions could have all sorts of influence on a game. Do you think that the table generally, where it matters in the teams that have gone up and gone down, do you think the table is a fair reflection of the best and worst teams in this division?
I think in general you have to say so. I mean, I don't think there's going to be many that will argue with the teams that are up there and the teams that have gone down. Sheffield Wednesday have got their own grievance, which we know about with a points deduction, but that in itself probably isn't their main grievance. It's the fact that with the Super League nonsense and the fact that the Big Six avoided a points deduction feels massively hypocritical from the governing bodies in the sport. So, and I completely understand and sympathise with that viewpoint, because I agree with it. Their owners got a lot to answer for there. You've got question marks over Derby's behaviour and stuff, where the EFL have just recently won an appeal now, so Derby will face a punishment. It looks likely that it will come into effect next season, which may see them in a Sheffield Wednesday type situation now in 12 months' time. But who knows? But yeah, on the balance of it, there are teams that perhaps where what they gave in heart and desire, they perhaps lacked in a little bit of quality. And I'm looking at the likes of Rotherham and Wickham there, who maybe just didn't quite have enough in the bank to get over the line. But they always seem to give their all whenever I saw them, and they were a credit to the division. But I had this conversation with my dad the other day that I think we've been maybe it's just a case that I'm looking at it one-eyed being that I'm looking at it from a Swans fan's perspective, but I think we're lucky to finish fourth. But then maybe because of the pandemic, I'm still trying to measure us against the normal season when everyone in reality this season has struggled to cope with the fixture pile-up. We did, as we talked earlier on in the year, about our fair share of luck, which of course we is well documented with last minute blocks and penalties going our way, etc. That seems to have run out now. So I don't think over the course of the season you could say we've been extremely lucky over 46 games. But so I can't really argue with how it looks. I don't think there's any standout ones there that you would go, well, they've really been screwed over this season. So no, I kind of go along with the idea that it looks fairly safe to say this division is settled down as it perhaps should have.
Steve, over the course of the season, we've kind of discussed sometimes whether the Swans position is a fair representation of performances, etc. And sometimes we said, okay, we don't really look like a team challenging for automatic promotion. Now that we've actually finished fourth, do you think that's fair? Does it flatter us in any way?
I think it probably does, if I'm being honest. I don't think we've played well in a lot of games. I think there's been a few instances of where we've had a little bit of luck. We've been good at sort of scoring from our first opportunity of a game or against the run of play, and that has sort of changed, the reality of the game. Which, in all fairness, we've been very, very good at that, but I do think it's happened quite more times than what it probably should have done. I mean, there's been a lot of games where we haven't created a lot. I mean, give the best example. I mean, Brentford at home, they absolutely battered us. We only had 2 shots and we've ended up with a 1-1. I mean, surely nobody's watched that and thought to themselves that we're anything other than jammy. I mean, now you've said this, I've decided to get the final XG table up of the season just out of interest, and it says that the Swans should be 13th. Now, I'm not sure if we should be that low, but I probably think we maybe should be in between about 7th and 10th, if I'm being honest. I'm not convinced by us entirely, but the league table says that we're in there and we're in the playoffs, but I don't think we're a great side by any means, but we have done very well to get to the position that we are in the table.
I will say, just sorry to jump in there, Guto. To anyone who didn't listen to our podcast like 5 or 6 weeks ago, we did have quite a discussion on the expected goals table, didn't we? And I think we came to quite a neat conclusion there that it is, you have to take it at face value and not read too much into it, because as Steve very rightly pointed out there, we've made a habit over the course of the season of scoring from one of our first chances and then trusting our defence to keep a clean sheet. And for a large part of the season, that was successful for us. And as a result, what that meant was we were getting expected goals of, well, just the one, and the opposition where we were blocking shots left, right and centre, and Woodman was saving, and he was saving penalties, etc. and whatnot. The opposition looked like they should have scored more goals than they did, partly due to a bit of luck, which we talked about, partly due to our strong defence, which, we know Woodman's won the Golden Glove now, so that in some way goes to, validate that argument. But expected goals will just look at, over the course of 90 minutes, it won't look at tactics, it won't look like at the theme of the game or the result. It'll just look at how many goals you're expected to score. And that's why we look like we should have been 13th. I'm not saying we shouldn't or should have been there, but it's just you've got to really look at expected goals table with a bit of a cynical eye, if that's fair.
From my point of view, we've spoken during the season about how Swans game results, which don't really reflect performances, etc. But when I look at the teams just outside the playoffs, there isn't one there that I'm thinking, yeah, do you know what? They deserve to finish in the top 6 ahead of the teams that are there. I don't think the Swans have been what your typical playoff qualifiers. I don't think we've looked like the teams the kind of team that you would expect to finish in the playoffs. But when you look at the rest of the league and what they had to offer, I don't think they've actually been better than us in any way, shape or form. I mean, Reading, in many ways similar to us, had a really good start to the season, fell away even more dramatically than we did. Cardiff, we know, were awful for most of the season, and then, put together a good run to finish 8th. QPR, kind of similar. Middlesbrough have been pretty medium throughout the season. There are a lot of teams there who've done okay in patches, but have not had anything like a kind of consistent run of performances and results. And I think it would be wrong for anybody to suggest that the Swans don't deserve their place in the playoffs based on the standards of the rest of the division. I think
been a poor league, Guto. It's been a poor division this year. I think I was saying earlier on that we don't think anyone there is surprising that you would say, well, we don't deserve to be there. Okay, who would you put in our place then? And I think that shows quite how poor the division's been. That I can't, and neither can you, pick out anyone who we should be swapping places with. So, I mean, it just goes to show, really, quite that how poor it's been, and that is obviously largely down to the pandemic.
Yeah, the big underachievers, according to XG, are Blackburn, who finished 15th. They should be 4th, is what that says.
But they can't defend to save their lives.
Yeah. No, that obviously is why they're not in there, because obviously they're goal scoring.
And clearly, even though they've got Adam Armstrong, they're not scoring as many as they should be, even though they didn't have a problem scoring. I don't think they scored, because the expected goals is saying, well, they should have scored even more than the opposition to end up that high. So it's...
The other surprise is Rotherham should be 9th, according to that.
But again, the finishing is appalling.
Yeah, that's what let them down. I mean, if you saw them against Cardiff the other day, they 100% should have won that game. And they obviously completely blew it, didn't they?
I've seen so many people come out and say, like, over the last few weeks, Rotherham, they shouldn't even be in this relegation fight. They're so good. And you're like, no, like, one of the key factors of football is you have to be able to put the ball in the back of the net. And there is an actual skill to keeping you cool in front of goal and making sure that ball hits the back of the net, which is something actually we've been quite good at. And when you go so many games being wasteful, as Rotherham have, you have to just come to the conclusion, no, you're just not good enough in that department. And in the Championship, I think we said it before, there's for most of the teams in this division, there's very little really dividing them quality-wise. And it is just those teams who are able to find those moments of quality in front of goal that do best in this division. And I think there are a lot of teams there who've been quite similar types of performances throughout the season, but they just haven't had those moments of quality at either end of the pitch to squeeze out the results. And I think there is actually a skill to that. It's sometimes down to luck, as we've proved this season. There's no doubt about that. But there is also a skill to just being able to find a way of winning and find a way of getting those points. And I think a lot of the teams in the division just haven't been good enough at that. That's my opinion.
While we're on the table situation as well, if we cast our minds back a few months now to when Neil Harris got sacked at Cardiff and replaced by Slick Mick, Steve. I remember the podcast we did that night, and we all joked and laughed and agreed that the best scenario would be for Cardiff to pick an upturn in form, win a load of games, look like they're the real deal, give Mick McCarthy the big contract so it hampers them for the next 3 years, and then they fall away. And it's almost as if we predicted the whole thing, guys.
It genuinely is. Like I'll be honest. I'll be honest. For a few games, I was like a little bit concerned, thinking, "Oh my gosh, is Mick McCarthy actually like going to fit in at Cardiff and going to turn them into a force?" But then, of course, no. It's the most predictable thing in football. They of course tailed away just after he was given the security of a longer term contract. And let's be honest, they've done well to finish 8th the way they've played this season. But I'm not overly concerned about them as things stand looking ahead to the future. Looking a bit further ahead to the future, we've got, of course, a playoff to look forward to. Barnsley got a draw against Norwich on the final day, and Bournemouth lost their final match of the season, meaning that Barnsley did finish 5th, securing a playoff match against the mighty Swans. Before we get into talk about the match itself, one announcement which took place a little bit earlier today as we were recording is the fact that there will be fans in both matches. We knew beforehand that the Westminster government had given clubs in England the opportunity to have limited crowds at their matches, but now the Welsh government has done the same thing here in Wales, and there will be a limited crowd at the Liberty, around about 3,000, we're led to believe. So Swansea fans are going to get a rough idea of what it's like to be a Cardiff fan in a cup match.
Every other year.
When this match comes out, I think it's set to be the lowest ever attendance for a Swans match in the Liberty. If I
think the lowest is about 5,000.
Yeah, so I think this will be the lowest ever attendance for a Swans match at the Liberty, which seems strange considering it's a playoff, but it's a big improvement on the zero that we've had for the rest of the season.
Interesting to know if we've ever in any division had a lower attendance for a playoff game. Shouldn't imagine we have.
The Swans have. I mean,
the Swans. Even in our Division 3 days, if we've ever had a lower, but I very much doubt, even in the vet,
there's no chance.
We ever had
Chester game in the playoffs was full, wasn't it? I know the lowest ever Swans crowd is about 1,300, I think. So we've had quite a few that are lower than this, but for a playoff game, isn't it? There's no chance it'll be a lower one.
I think it was around about the early 70s that we had our lowest average attendance for a season. I think that was like the low 2000s, something like that, which is like staggering how low attendances were back in the day.
I think during the Petty era, there was one game that had 2,000 and it wasn't 2,100, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like it was that low. I think it was a Tuesday night game. And like obviously we must have been playing someone from up north or something, and they wouldn't have brought many either, and a lot of people didn't want to give Petty any money, so they didn't go. But yeah, 2,000, and that was for a league game. It's pretty staggering, really. Yeah,
it makes you realise how much the club has grown. But obviously these days that stands out as an extremely low, attendance for any match, let alone a playoff match. So, I mean, Matt, are you going to be queuing up to throwing your name in the hat then to try and get a ticket?
No, and twofold. First one is logistically, I don't have a season ticket for this season, so I mean I'm not going to get one anyway. The second one is more that I'm not really sure I would enjoy it more than watching it in a pub, because it's 3,000. I get the clamour for the tickets, getting back into the stands and the stadiums. I want it as much as anyone, but I want us to go back to a normality where you can fill the stand, get an atmosphere going, laugh with your mates, really feel we talked on a pod a while back, Domino, about the match day experience and how much so much more than the 90 minutes. I'm just not having that back. I'm all for the baby steps that need to be taken to get there, but this standing a couple of meters apart from the closest person, only 3,000 in the stand, there's not going to be an atmosphere, is there? There's going to be quite a lonely experience, I should imagine. Not to really feel like I'm putting a downer on the thing. I'm all for everyone who wants to go, and I hope that anyone who's desperate to go and has the season to go, whatever, gets the opportunity to do so. But for myself, just not really overly excited by it. That makes me a bad Swans fan, doesn't it?
Do you know what? It's weird, because I think a lot of fans will feel kind of the same. This sense that for me personally, I thought I'd be really excited for this moment, but now that it's here, I'm thinking, yeah, I'll take it or leave it. Really, if there are others who want to go ahead and take it, then I'm actually happy to say, yeah, you go and take it. I'd love to watch live football again. I'd love to be back at the Liberty again, but there is a feeling that it's going to be quite sterile, and it's not as appealing as I thought it would be. I mean, my mum called me earlier and asked, like, "Oh, are you excited then? Are you excited about, do you think you may be able to get a ticket?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll probably apply for a ticket, but I'll be honest, like, I can't pretend that I'm sort of over the moon about this and really desperate to get my hands on a ticket," which seems bizarre, because it's a playoff match. After more than a year without seeing any kind of live football, I should be absolutely desperate for this match. But for some reason, and I can't quite put my finger on why. I wouldn't be too disappointed if I missed out on this ticket and I had to watch it from home.
So if I make it though, imagine we score. That's the problem. My first thought is when we score. If you're watching it at home with family, or you're watching it in a pub, with a bubble of friends or whatever, and you're gonna go ballistic. You're gonna be jumping around for joy and whatnot, and really excited. If you're standing with a 2 meter distance all around you on your own, is it quite going to match even that? Is it going to match how you would feel at home?
I'm still going to be on the pitch. I'll be honest. I'm still going to one-man pitch invasion. But I get what you mean. But I mean, it's hard to say because none of us have been in that kind of situation before. None of us have been in this kind of match. But I mean, we've all been, I think, in away games, which you kind of sitting 3 meters away from the nearest person to you. So you know where you have a rough idea of what it's like. If the Swans score, I'm still going to be celebrating like mad. I'm still going to be losing my head. I'm still going to be kind of shouting, "Who are you? Who are you?" to an invisible away end. I'm still going to be reacting like that. If any kind of steward tells me, "No, you have to sit down and behave yourself," then I'll give them the same reaction I would in any other situation like that.
It's no more ridiculous than when I scream at the TV on a Saturday afternoon, mate, as if anyone can hear me then either.
Yeah, exactly. And while we're on the subject of that, I was, I kind of got a realization of the weekend. Like every single Swans match, pretty much over the past year, I've still put on my Swans top for that morning to watch the football. Like it's the same routine, and it kind of dawned on me more than a year afterwards. This is like the sign of some kind of issues. Like,
are we talking socks and shorts as well?
Not quite. No. It is.
No, we're not going top. Proper full kit wanker job. We're just going the Swans top, are we?
Swans top, basically dressing the same way as I would if I was going to the match on that day. So like just jeans and Swans top. But it struck me. This is just a little bit kind of. If you were to say that there was some kind of religious cult where they all dress up in the uniform of their deity on a certain day each week, you'd say that's some weird shit right there, and that's those people need professional help. And it kind of dawned on me this week.
Most of the time, sorry, mate. Most of the time, I'm lucky if I got more than my boxers on to watch the Swans this season. I'm certainly not putting jeans on in my living room.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah, 2 ends of the same scale, I think, mate.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, one question: are you going to be wearing jeans for the playoff semi-final, and are you going to be in the Liberty for it?
Jeans probably, although it might depend on how warm it is on that night. Will I be at the Liberty? I don't think so. Again, it's the same thing. I mean. The whole thing of football is a lot of it atmosphere and goal celebrations, and they're not going to be very good in a socially distanced stadium. I mean, I was hoping for something more along the lines of the League Cup final, where you had like a limited crowd, but everyone was quite close together, and you had to take a test beforehand. As long as you were negative, you could go in, and then, like I say, you were bunched in together, and that meant you could have a decent atmosphere. Now, I don't intend on going and being able to sit 1.5 meters from all my mates. And everyone else being the same. I mean, that's not my idea of a good time. I would much rather go to the pub, and as ludicrous as it sounds, where for some reason there you probably will be allowed to have a table of 4 all sit together, but you can't at an outdoor football match. So, yeah, I honestly think it's a funny one. I think a lot of people will want to go, but I really don't think it's going to be all this cracked up to be. So I think it's the pub for me. I'm not convinced I'm going to regret that decision either. So, bring on when we can have normal crowds without distancing.
Have they made a decision on the final? What would that be like?
So I'm assuming the final should be something similar to the FA Cup final, where it should be a quarter full and you get about 10,000 each. Now, if they do that, and like I say, you can go a bit closer in together, then I think that would be a lot more appealing. But there isn't the final decision on that. But the fact is, if they can have other stuff at Wembley with those type of crowds, then why can't they for a playoff final? It'd be crazy if they don't.
I think the difference why they haven't done a similar kind of plan for the Liberty is just purely down to the fact that Wales hasn't had any kind of test events before this. Obviously, Wembley didn't start with, the setup they had for the League Cup match. They had done tests beforehand where they had similar kind of setups to what will be in place at the Liberty. But when England partially opened up before Christmas, just when COVID was spreading through the entire country again. Obviously, the Welsh government didn't feel that was sensible, which, let's face it, was probably the right decision. Obviously, so they haven't held those test events, but obviously Wembley had been tested out. So we are just taking those baby steps, whereas I guess in England they're slightly ahead of us on that kind of road back to normality when it comes to sport. So that's why I imagine it is. But I mean, it's so strange that three of us who've been going to watch the Swans for God knows how many years, aren't totally ecstatic about this, and it's weird. It's not the response that I expected, but all of us feel kind of the same about this. Hopefully, those who do get a ticket, go there with with all the excitement in the world. I'm sure if I get a ticket, then I will be really excited on the day, and really pumped up, etc. And hopefully, despite the weird setup, the fans who go there will be able to create a bit of an atmosphere and really get behind the team. So on that note, we can finally get on to speak about the football itself and what is sure to be an absolutely massive game. First of all, Matt, let's start with you. I'll be honest, of all the teams in the playoffs, I am glad that it's Barnsley that we're playing in the semi-final and not Bournemouth or Brentford. Do you share that opinion?
Yeah. I think if you're looking at the four teams that are in there and the three that we could face, I think it would be a widely shared opinion. And that's no disrespect to Barnsley, but I just think Bournemouth and Brentford, they have our number of sorts. We know, Brentford have outplayed us every time we've played them over the last, 6 or 7 times. It's been quite, they're quite a fierce outfit. And last season they went right to the final, and no one's betting against them doing the same again. They got a man up top who's scored past 30 goals a season now, this year, and they're a constant threat on the attack. So want to avoid them. Bournemouth, just miserable, just absolutely miserable against. So I think the key is, obviously, with the semi-finals, you've got to play them twice. So you've got to really come out on top twice. And I don't fancy us doing that against Brentford or Bournemouth. Barnsley, I think maybe we could. And then if we did get to a final then that would mean that we just have to do it once in a freak 90 minutes, jammiest game of your life sort of format. We could get over the line. But I can't imagine us repeating that over 2 games against the other two. But Barnsley are a good team, and I'm a bit worried, Guto, to be honest with you, because this time last year, or around about this time last year, I was a massive fan of Brentford. I was really loving Brentford, and everything that they stood for was, buying low, selling high, and really coming into their own as a force to be reckoned with, playing delightful football. And then it all went dreadfully sour around about playoff time.
When a certain manager started opening its mouth.
Yeah. And no, but I'm worried that I'm kind of I like Barnsley. I'm worried that's gonna go the same way that we got them in the semis. But no, it's for me, it's the one out of the 3 options that I think more Swans fans than not would have preferred to come up against. So, and we've got the second leg at home. Whatever advantage there is to be gained with these small crowds, it's at home for us. So, every little thing can help you get there.
Steve, we've done the double over Barnsley this season, 2-0 on both occasions, both on some of the worst pitches known to man. Will that have any kind of bearing when it comes to the playoffs, do you think?
It's hard to say, and I mean, I think from a fan's point of view, it probably means we're a little bit more confident than maybe we would be otherwise. But I mean, I think when we played Barnsley, they were probably just starting to
Matt, do you think Steve Cooper will want the Swans to be favourites? Because I saw a tweet from Barnsley earlier this week saying we underdogs, we enjoy being that way. But as a lot of Swansea fans pointed out, all the pundits almost think Barnsley are favourites for the match. The bookies think that they're the favourites to reach Wembley. Do you think Steve Cooper will be happy that people are underestimating the Swans, or will he? Will we want to have that little bit more confidence going into the match, perhaps?
It's mind games already, isn't it? I mean, that's something that it comes rife in these high pressure, high stake games. But no, I think what is said publicly and what is said privately are going to be two very different things. So, Barnsley can bleat out in the media about, we're underdogs. We're going into this, Swansea are favourites. They got X, Y, and Z and that. And I get it, because you want to take the pressure off the players. But behind closed doors, you're not going to have their manager telling them, you know what, you're underdogs. If you lose, you lose. He's going to get them fired up. He's going to let them believe that they are better than us. So I don't think for 1 second it's anything more than the mind games in that respect. From the pundits' perspective, I think, I think perhaps it will favour us a little bit because we'll have no pressure from no external pressure, at least. I should imagine we'll still be putting pressure on ourselves internally to get to the final, but it's always hard when the media expect so much of you and you're unable to produce. So if they think that we're just going to rock up and roll over, then hopefully we can prove a couple of people wrong.
Matt, do you think Barnsley deserve the favourites tag? Do you think they are actually that they are rightfully favourites for this game, or do you think actually we as the team who've beaten them twice already this season, finished above them in the league, been above them throughout the season? Do you think the bookies have got it wrong?
It's a bit of an odd one, to be honest. For all the reasons you just said. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily put Barnsley as favourites. Certainly, form this season would suggest not. We finished above them. We've beaten them twice already, and and so that in itself should be enough. But at the same time, I think people love to build up the. What I would say is Barnsley would be in the underdog, because Barnsley should never be where they are. That's not criticising them, but they have massively, for me, overachieved. And that's great credit to their manager and their players and what they've done this season, and more power to them. But for me, that makes them an underdog story, not a favourite story. But maybe they're looking at the rise of Barnsley and hoping, like last year where everyone was harping on about Brentford left, right and centre, maybe that's a similar sort of thing here with Barnsley, that they're just really thinking now it's Barnsley's time to stun the world and go into the Premier League. Who knows? But I think they've done fantastic to be where they are. I still feel like that in itself is an underdog story. So yeah, it's a bit peculiar for me.
Well, Steve, let's face it, Barnsley are a good team. They are in the playoffs on merit, and considering the fact that they only narrowly avoided relegation last season, albeit, on a run of form which would have suggested that they would, avoid relegation this time around. I mean, they started the season really poorly results-wise, but they just, put together an incredible run, and the kind of run that would give fans confidence going into the playoffs, wouldn't it? And perhaps that's not what we've had from the Swans. I mean, Barnsley, their second half of the season has been quite strong, even though they've had a slight dip lately. The Swans, it's been much more indifferent, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. That's why I do think they do have an edge at this moment. Really, it is based on form. I mean, their run started, didn't it? Mainly in the second half of the season. They didn't start the season very well at all. I mean, they were looking like they could go down, weren't they, earlier in the season? So the fact they've made the playoffs is an incredible achievement. Really, definitely the biggest overachievers you would have thought in the division. Certainly, nobody would have predicted a top 6 finish for Barnsley this season. So, yeah, I think they'll be quietly confident. They'll probably try and push the underdog tag, but I'm not sure I entirely agree with it because, like I said, our record has not been anywhere near as good over the last 15 games or so. Obviously, we've lost quite a lot of games, and then we've conceded far more goals than we did in the first 30 or so games. So, yeah, I think Barnsley will fancy this, and they'll also try and play the media game as well to try and put a little bit of pressure on us.
And if we look at Barnsley's squad, they've got a lot of players here who were bought for relatively cheaply, but who've gone on then to show their quality. They are among the best in the business when it comes to wheeling and dealing in the Championship, and they've been that way for a number of years now. This is the culmination of years of really shrewd and steady squad building. But you look at the likes of Mads Andersen in defence, Alex Mowat in midfield. Daryl Dike has arrived halfway through the season and scored 9 goals in 19 appearances. I really like the look of Callum Britton in midfield, Callum Stiles at left wing back. Cauley Woodrow, of course, has been in the goals. Connor Chaplin. These kind of players, they've really made their stamp in this division this season. But I mean, Matt, one of the ways in which they've done it is similar to Swansea, really. When Barnsley are at their best, when they are high energy, when they are in your face, closing you down, really forcing you to make poor decisions, basically. I mean, do you think that the Swans have what it takes actually to deal with that and to adapt their game to circumvent that kind of the high pressing, high energy game that Barnsley play?
Yeah, I mean, we're capable of it, whether we do it or not. As we discussed form and whatnot, it's another thing. Early on in the season, you would say that our tactic to grab a goal, be clinical with our finishing, and stifle teams at the other end would stand us in good stead. But for me, I've not watched every Barnsley game. I could be lying if I said I did. But from what I've seen, particularly in the last few months or so, it feels like it could boil down to how we handle DK up front. I feel like he's a beast, and he's going to be really difficult. He's going to be an absolute handful, and the other players are performing great, whatever, and he seems to be a focal point from what I've seen to what Barnsley do so well, and so often the end product as well. He's the one I'm worried about, because he's the sort of player, we shopped in America, didn't we, in January, and had we brought him back, we could be now looking at talking about how we're back in the Premier League automatically, because he looks like the real deal, and there's already talk of some big money moves going in for him in the summer, from the likes of Man United and the such. So he's already pricked the interest of some huge clubs. It'll be interesting to see what happens there, but also how we cope with it, because he's been a revelation. The other players, as you say, are players that we've heard of before and have performed spectacularly over the last 9 months or so. He's the ace in the hole for me.
He has been absolutely brilliant. There's no doubt about that. One little maybe glimmer of hope in this situation is the fact that he's only got 1 in his last 5. And when you look at the teams that he's scored against this season, he hasn't scored against any of the teams kind of in the top 6 or chasing the top 6. They have been against either relegation battlers or mid-table teams. That's obviously not to discredit, he has been a fantastic signing for them, and he is going to be a major danger, and he's not going to be the only one. One other stat I picked out that may offer us a bit of hope. Barnsley score an awful lot of their goals from dead ball situations, set pieces, penalties. 41% of their goals, or put it this way, only 59% of their goals this season have come from open play, which is very low. It's one of the lowest in the division. Only Cardiff have a worse stat for percentage of goals from open play in the top half of the table. And it's one of the few areas where actually Swansea have been pretty good throughout the season, is defending set pieces. Swansea have only conceded 9 goals from dead ball situations all season, which is the lowest in the Championship. So that just gives me a little bit of hope to say that if we can stop Barnsley from set pieces, you do go a long way towards stopping them. And I do think that if we've got, the right defence in place, and that defence is switched on as we know it can be, then it is a very difficult defence to play against. Steve, on that note, first of all, what's the system that we should be adopting for this match, and who are the players that you would pick for such a big game?
This is genuinely a tough question. I'm not sure what to do in this one, whether we should revert to a back 5, which in general stood us in good stead. But obviously it seemed to go a bit stale, so we changed it, which I thought was the right call at the time. Do we go back to it now? Maybe, I think. Could be worth considering, because, I don't see another way of us going up other than us basically shithousing our way through it and, maybe just taking one of the odd chances we create and keeping things tight defensively. So in that sense, maybe we should go to a back 5, and then that allows us to play with Bennett, Gueye and Cabango. I know you're probably going to make the point about Cabango, especially being good in the air. I mean, he scored, obviously, in the away game against Barnsley, didn't he? So, that could be a good threat for us from a set piece. And then you're thinking in midfield, I know Hourihane has had some criticism at times, but I really think if we're going to get a goal, he needs to be in the team. So it'd probably be him with Grimes and Fulton in the middle, Lowe up top. I suppose it'd probably go, Roberts would definitely be one wing back with and Manning with the other. So I think that's what I would do for the first leg, and then I'd maybe consider changing it for the second one and maybe going with a 4-3-3, depending on how we've done. I just think the first game is a crucial one, really. We don't really want to be losing it, I don't think. I think if we were to, we don't really want to be chasing a game. That doesn't really suit us at all. We're far better at hanging on to a lead than being made to chase. So yeah, we need to make sure we're in a good position really for the second leg.
Matt, what about you? What will you pick? What would you pick then if you were Steve Cooper heading up to Oakwell on Monday night?
I wouldn't really change a lot over that from what we've done in the last couple of weeks personally, because I feel like what you talked about us looking so refreshed and stuff with AU and Lowe obviously feeling like they're a bit of a rest and whatever, and that's because we've had the luxury of playing the likes of Liam Cullen and Morgan Whittaker and giving them the game time, and I feel like maybe playing the type where you've got AU and Lowe either side of Liam Cullen and going with that gives us an attacking impetus to really try and get the result at Barnsley. That will stand us in great stead. I do understand that these games are, and this season has been in such a way that, and perhaps lacking in the quality, that going down even by the odd goal in the first leg could be a horrible situation to come back in the home leg too. But I'm not 100% sold on the idea of going back to the back 5, which I was previously a huge advocate of. But it's hard because also one of our biggest threats are the likes of Connor Roberts and that, and so you want him. He's probably one of our best attackers, which is ludicrous from a right back, but he's a real starlet and probably one of our most sellable assets now at the club. So I really hope that we can get him in the game, whatever formation we play. But no, I feel like the likes of Whittaker and Cullen have
I'm really torn on it because I think we have played better football visually over the last few weeks than we have done for a while. The passing's a little bit better. We've been scoring reasonably regularly this over the last few games, but that 5 at the back, it did kind of smother Barnsley earlier on the season. It did hold strong, and it just gives you that kind of extra defensive solidity when played properly, of course, which I don't think we've had really when we've been playing with a 4 at the back over recent games. And I'd be tempted, like you, Steve, to go 5 at the back again and just get that extra defender in there just for the first leg, just to make sure that we aren't 2 goals down, say, going back to the Liberty. If we can just keep a 0-0 or, heaven forbid, snatch a goal like we did in previous games against Barnsley to give us that advantage, I mean, it would be massive. But I don't think Cooper's going to do that. I think, we've been playing 4-5-1 or 4-3-3 then for the last few games. I think it would be a very unusual act by Cooper to change that now and go back to the formation that we used in the first part of the season and for much of the second as well. So I'd be surprised if we did go back to 5 at the back, but I definitely wouldn't be. If he did go for it, I think it would be a very brave move because he's leaving himself open for a lot of criticism if it goes wrong after switching to 5 at the back. But I would understand the thinking, definitely. Just before we go, obviously we're playing against Barnsley in the playoffs. This may be a bit of a downer, really, to end the podcast on, but it does bring back memories of the last time we faced Barnsley in the playoffs. It's actually the last time that we lost to Barnsley in any competition. But it was 15 years ago, a decade and a half, when we all boarded trains, buses, and made our way up to Cardiff for that day, the playoff final. It was all written in the stars that the Swans would go back to the Championship after more than 20-year absence from the second tier. Unfortunately, it didn't go to plan. Matt, what are your memories of that fateful day?
Well, I could give you mine, but now seems as good a time as ever to introduce our special guest, Rory Fallon, on the... No, I'm joking. It was just one of those games, wasn't it, where we should have had them out of sight. I felt like we were better than them in almost every capacity in that day, and I was really gutted when it went the way it did. I felt like we were better. As I say, I feel like we were the better team. We missed quite a few chances, and it comes down to penalties then, and it was a horror show, wasn't it? Was it Tate, Bayo, was it maybe O'Leary, or maybe I can't remember if anyone else missed the penalty, but
it was just Bayo and then Tate who missed.
Just Bayo and Tate, yeah, and Bayo, as I remember in particular, was a shocker. But it was. It was gutting. It was gutting because I wasn't as heartbroken, if I'm honest, as I was with Northampton back in '97, because I feel like Northampton was just such a shock. But when you get to penalties, I think you're already emotionally braced, aren't you? Because you know that this could go horribly wrong. Whereas Northampton was such a shock, it just completely blew me away. The Barnsley one was more just feeling a bit gutted about the whole thing, to be honest with you. But history is a way of making you think, well, maybe it was for the best, because what followed that was unprecedented and led us to a European adventure ultimately. So world has a funny way of making things pan out.
Steve, how do you remember that day at the Millennium Stadium? Matt says it wasn't as bad as Northampton. What was your take on it?
I think for me it was actually worse because it was around the time where I was going to pretty much all the games and I was like dreaming of getting in the Championship. I remember obviously Cardiff were in there, a lot of other good sides were in there. And you just think at that time as well, like it was so unexpected us, being up there. I remember thinking, Christ, we might never get another chance like this. And you just don't know how things will pan out. Obviously, everything panned out brilliantly in the end, and it didn't really matter. But it was horrible because we were the better side. I mean, I remember Tate and Trundle missing big chances. When it goes to pens, if you lose, it's going to be horrible. And yeah, the journey home was pretty sickening. Really, you can't really describe it in any other way. It was horrible. I remember that year there was the Yorkshire curse was out in force. We didn't pick up many wins against Yorkshire sides, and obviously it ended then with us losing quite unfairly in a playoff final. It's quite remarkable you said, Mike, that we haven't lost to Barnsley since, and technically I can't remember us ever losing to them because if you think about it, that was a draw, and I think that season we took 4 points off them. So that's pretty staggering, really, isn't it? I know we haven't played Barnsley an incredible amount of times, but we must be into double figures of fixtures against them, and we haven't physically lost the game to them in 90 minutes, which there can't be many sides with that we've got a record like that against.
As you said that, I am looking back now through them, and the last time that actually we lost to Derby in normal time without the need for penalties was in 1983 in a Division 2 fixture, which is absolutely unbelievable. That's 10, 12, 14, 16. That's 17 games ago.
It's mad, isn't it?
So we've played each other 16 times since then, and the only time they've got the better of us was that playoff final. Do they just save their best for when they play us in significant matches? Do they just say, you can have the regular league matches, but when it comes to the real decisive stuff, the stuff that decides who goes up and stays down, that's when we're going to sucker punch you. It's mad.
Just looking at the teams for the game. I think one of the biggest disappointments was the fact that the team that Kenny Jackett had fashioned for that run was just you never know how they'd have fared in the Championship because it was such a fiercely strong attacking team, full of bite and certainly wouldn't roll over anywhere. So it was probably the most combative Swans team I've probably seen in my lifetime, and it had everything, didn't it? You're looking at the likes here, you had your Leon Knights, Andy Robinsons, Bayos, Kev McLeod, Lee Trundle.
There were some characters there, weren't there?
Yeah, you had Leon in there. You had your Gary Monks, Tate, Kev Austin, Willie Garay. But that Barnsley team, some familiar names there. Daniel Nardiello, Mark Richards, Stephen McPhail of obviously a Cardiff fame.
Wow.
So yeah, it's quite nice to look back at the blast from the past, but it was certainly you do think of that. Maybe it was an opportunity missed for all those players to really showcase, because I know Trundle went on with Bristol City, whatever, and ended up getting a bit of Championship football under his belt. But you do wonder whether or not, as a unit, whether that team could have done something in the Championship as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that squad, it was a good squad, wasn't it? I know the season itself was it started off on a massive high. We dipped in the second half of the season, a bit like this one, but then going to the playoffs in the end. But the team at the start of that match, Willie Garay in goal. You had a back four of Sam Ricketts, Kevin Austin, Gary Monk, Alan Tate, Christian O'Leary and Owentida Jones starting in central midfield, Leon on the right, Andy Robinson on the left, Rory Fallon and Leon Knight up front. And the players who came on, Lee Trundle, Bayo Akinfenwa and Kevin McLeod coming off the bench. I mean, that was a strong team. And it was obviously, it's not one of, thankfully it didn't turn into one of those kind of decisive moments where that's your one chance to go up, or else you're doomed to stay in League One forever, because obviously 2 years later we were going up. But I mean, it was, I'll be honest, from my point of view, that's my most painful memory as a Swans fan, I think.
League One team or knock it though. I'll ask you both this: would you fancy that team that played against Barnsley or this team?
This team, definitely. Without hesitation.
Yeah, you'd say this team, but that team would definitely cause a few headaches going forward. I just think that defensively, that team wasn't great, especially the goalkeeper.
Yeah, Gary was not the same player in League One as he was in League Two.
Gary should have been left in jail at Bury. He wasn't staying after it. Literally, they should have taken the team bus back to Swans and just go, just leave him here, he's pointless now.
I can't believe though the midfield of I know Owain Tudor-Jones was decent that season. He was a decent player in general, League One level, but the midfield that day was Owain Tudor-Jones and Christian O'Leary. That doesn't seem like a midfielder you'd expect to see in a League One playoff final, if I'm being honest.
The fact that we went into that game without the centre midfielder on the bench.
Yeah.
We had two strikers, a winger, a wing back, and a goalkeeper. So Jacket loved his attacking players, didn't he? You just look at that team and you just wonder how on earth we didn't just blitz our way to the title, because and the fact that Leon Knight and Lee Trundle rarely played together is one of the biggest travesties in modern football for me.
Yeah, here's a question then, right? So the team that did actually go up under Martinez, how would that team get on against this one?
It would run rings around it, if I'm being honest.
I think the same.
That team was a cut above. That has to be like one of the best teams that's ever been in the third tier. It was just an unbelievable side, that one. I mean, players that should never ever have been at such a low level. There was something seriously special about that team. There was some real Premier League quality in that team. Whereas you look back at the team that Jacket had, how many of those players can we honestly say were Premier League quality? Obviously, Monk and Leon went on to play, as did Sam Ricketts, in the Premier League. I think Leon Knight possibly had the potential to do so if his head was in the right place. Other than that, obviously Alan Tate played a few games in the Premier League too, but that things got in his way there. But other than that, I don't think there was. Trundle obviously was on the bench, and he possibly could have done in the Premier League had he gone at the right time, etc. But there was so much more in that Martinez team. De Vries, Rangel, you still had the likes of Monk and Leon and Tate, etc. You had Ashley Williams joining later on in that season. The midfield, Ferry Bodder, Darren Prattley, even. Jason Scotland wasn't bad up front. Paul Anderson, the way he was playing that season, looked like a Premier League player in waiting. That was something special, and I think it was a cut above the squad that just fell short of the final hurdle, in my opinion. I don't know about you, Matt.
Oh yeah, I mean, facts don't lie. That team romped home the division, and that team did what the previous team couldn't. So. It was a special team under a special manager, and I don't think anyone can rewrite history there. It was just phenomenal to watch. Plucking players from left, right, and centre you'd never heard of before, and suddenly they were just like the most entertaining team. And Jason Scotland and watching the likes of Jody Gomez and stuff like that, and having that delight of just knowing that we would have 60% of the ball minimum, and we would pass triangles around the opposition. Martinez came not to win games and take us up. He came to introduce a philosophy, and that stood us in good stead for 10 years. So there's a lot to credit that man for that the future Swans teams benefited from, because he revolutionised everything, didn't he? Let's be honest.
Absolutely. And we've gone off on a little bit of a tangent there, but let's just bring it back to this week's match. We're just going to finish off the podcast, as we always do, with a prediction. This is very difficult because of the circumstances, because of the importance of the game. It's all down to who kind of reacts best, who brings their A game and rises to the occasion. On that note, Steve, away at Oakwell on Monday night, do you think the Swans are going to rise to the occasion, and what's your prediction?
I think we'll do okay. I'm expecting quite a cagey affair. I don't think anyone's going to go gung-ho to try and land a knockout blow in the first game, really. My prediction is going to be, though, that Barnsley will win 1-0.
1-0 from Steve. Matt, what are you saying?
I agree with almost everything Steve says there. I think this is where the advantage of the second leg comes into it, because you don't know when you're playing home first how the ground is going to lie. Whereas when you're home second, you know exactly what you need to do. And so for that reason, I do think, like Steve said, it's going to be quite a cagey affair. No one's going to show their cards, or all their cards at least. Barnsley will understand that obviously it would be advantageous for them at this point to try and get the win while they're at home, but at the same time, they certainly don't want to lose the home leg and give themselves an impossible task. So I think it's going to finish 1-1. And I do think actually at that point both managers are going to be quite happy that they've got a 90-minute shootout at the Liberty to decide their fate.
Do you know what? I'm tempted to go the same way. I agree with both of you. I don't think it's going to be a pretty game, really. Now, the pretty football is going to be reserved for Bournemouth against Brentford, and this one is not going to be a pretty one for the neutrals. Both these teams. I think Barnsley's passing stats are like among the worst in the division. They're not, they're capable of having some nice moves, etc., but they're not really a passing side in any way, shape, or form. Their game revolves around putting the opposition under kind of physical pressure and just overloading them in that respect. But I think the Swans are capable of matching Barnsley's strengths, and I think while neither side is going to go gung ho and go hell for leather, I can see both sides cancelling each other out, and I'm going to agree with you, Matt. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. That may be optimistic, because I think a 1-0 draw would be a good result from this game. As long as we're not trailing going back to the Liberty, I think it would be a decent result. But the main thing, really, even if we're just a goal down going back to the Liberty, it's not the worst result in a two-legged fixture where there's no away goals rule. I think basically I'd be surprised if this game is kind of out of reach going back to the Liberty, because I don't think either side is going to take too many risks at Oakwell. Now that I've said that, you can put...
I'm terrified now we've all agreed on that.
You can put your money on a 3-0 Barnsley win.
Oh God! We don't score enough goals either. That if we did go for it and we lost 2-0 in the first leg, you'd say, you got the home leg at home, but are we likely to score 2? Are we likely to score 3? Even less so, So now we all agreed it's going to be cagey. I'm terrified.
I think we've got a better chance against Barnsley than we have against Bournemouth or Brentford. But we all agree, I think, that it's going to be a very difficult game, and the Barnsley are going to give us a hell of a challenge, and it's going to be, I think, down to mental toughness as much as physical toughness who goes through you. And Swans are going to have to hold their nerve. They're going to have to deal with a lot of pressure, and it's going to be a real test for them. And it's going to be interesting to see how our approach differs from last season against Brentford, because we've got a very different opposition, but we're in a very different situation as well. So let's just see how it goes. Hopefully, of course, the Swans can rise to the occasion and can give us a valuable result going back to the Liberty. We will be back next week after that match to look back at the Oakwell clash and look ahead to the massive one at the Liberty. And by then, who knows, we may have found out if any of us have tickets for that match. But until then, thank you very much for joining us.